Today, we're going to be talking about something that you need to be extremely concerned with, which is why are Democrats fighting so vigorously against Elon Musk and Donald Trump's plan to make the government more efficient? This is really serious, and I want to have a high-level conversation here. So if you're just looking for a liberals getting owned kind of video, this one isn't going to be for you. The reason you should be so concerned is because if this problem doesn't get fixed, it will literally bankrupt and ruin America. So why are the Democrats fighting against it? The liberal media has been losing its mind over Donald Trump wanting to cut waste and fraud from the government. So here is MSNBC's Joy Reid criticizing the idea of the government actually running efficiently for the taxpayers and not running at a $2 trillion deficit every single year. Watch.
Musk and Ramaswamy have already promised massive cuts to federal agencies Republicans don't like. They also want to cut $500 billion a year from the federal budget and fire the vast majority of federal workers. All told, they want to slash $2 trillion in government spending. DOGE has no statutory authority and is essentially a presidential advisory commission that can make recommendations. Neither Musk nor Ramaswamy have any public service experience, but that's not stopping them. Their targets include the Department of Defense, Sesame Street, the IRS, the Department of Justice, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
You should be extremely worried about anybody who is against the idea of the government running more efficiently. I mean, she was trying so hard to make her point that she resorted to quoting Punchbowl News. These people are so anti-Trump that they're actually rooting for the downfall of America. We've all been to the DMV before, and we all know how inefficient it is. Now extrapolate that over everything, and that's how the federal government works. And the reason why that is because of this. So if you understand what makes capitalism so beautiful, it's that it allows for competition. Meaning if your business doesn't operate as well as it can, it allows for someone else to operate in that void that you're missing and make a successful and thriving business out of it. Even take away customers from you because they operate better. But the federal government has no competition, so there is no incentive for it to work more efficiently. It just works how it's going to work. The best example I can give about the difference between how the federal government works and how an efficient organization would work is this. In a business, if you have a $10 million budget to accomplish a thing, if you don't accomplish the set goal with the $10 million budget, people get fired and it's looked at as a failure. In government, if you have a $10 million budget to accomplish a goal and the goal doesn't get accomplished, you go back the following year and say, well, I actually need a $50 million budget to accomplish this goal. And then if you don't accomplish it that year, now you need a $100 million budget to accomplish the goal. So the goal never gets accomplished, and in fact, more money gets thrown towards it to accomplish it with no results being shown for. So when Elon Musk and Vivek are talking about cutting the government drastically, what they're basically saying is we can achieve the exact same quality of service that the government provides now for substantially less than what we pay for it. That is what efficiency is. Efficiency is getting the same results for less cost or getting better results for the same cost. And that's what I find so baffling about the whole thing is they somehow demonize the richest man on earth, possibly the best entrepreneur to ever live, for being in charge of aiding the federal government and determining how they can get the most out of their capital expenditures as possible. This man is arguably the best person who's ever lived at getting the most out of a dollar. He gutted Twitter by 90% of their staff, and the service got better. He applied that same principle to both SpaceX and Tesla. In Tesla, he learned how to commercialize the electric battery to make it affordable and widespread. In SpaceX, he learned how to commercialize rocket technology and make it better and cheaper at the same time. So here's MSNBC's fake Walter Cronkite also trashing the idea of the government spending less money and why Elon Musk is destined to fail. It's a horrible idea, everything else. Watch.
Here is how enthusiastic the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was about House Republicans' big meeting today with Elon Musk.
Very productive meeting.
Mr. Speaker, will you cut Medicare and Social
Listen, I'll just say this is a very productive meeting with Republicans from the Senate and the House today. No, I can't. I'm late for a portrait unveiling.
Very productive meeting. Let me translate. In Congressional Speak to Reporters, very productive meeting is what you say when you have absolutely nothing to say. It certainly is not the language used to convey enthusiasm. That is not full speed ahead language. And I'm late for a portrait unveiling is another way of saying I'm going to run away from this insanity as fast as I can right now.
Now, did that sound like somebody trying to report the news honestly, or somebody just espousing his opinion in the most ludicrous and nonsensical way? I mean, he literally took Speaker Johnson's words and said, let me translate what they mean for you, and spun it into exactly what fits his Democrat propaganda narrative. Again, imagine how far your head has to be up your own partisan ass for you to actually hate the idea of someone wanting to make the government more efficient and cheaper and save the taxpayers money. So Joe Scarborough of Morning Joe, who went and bent the knee to Trump at Mar-a-Lago, but because of all of the backlash from their crybaby liberal audience, have decided to reverse course on the whole objective news thing, loses his mind over the idea of Elon Musk fixing the government and Donald Trump wanting to fix the government for the American people, and just says how mad he is at the idea of it. Watch.
Something that when I hear these two guys talking about how they're going to cut $2 trillion from the budget, it's a joke. And it's a joke because this is something you and I have been obsessed about for a very long time, the national debt, getting the deficit under control. And I just, just looking at your first chart here, I mean, people need to understand Social Security and Medicare make up about 50% of what the government spends. You add defense and veterans benefits, that's another 20%. So you're up to 70%. You then add debt and how much it costs to service that debt. That's another 10%. So, Steve, before they even start talking about cutting these so-called federal employees that are bankrupting us, it just makes me so mad. It's so disingenuous.
Again, do not trust these people. They have no interest in working for the American people. They want to maintain power, maintain control, expand the government under any costs, and it's going to ruin America. When people hear about the national debt, it's not just this arbitrary number that's very large. The problem is the interest payments on the national debt. Right now, as he pointed out, it's roughly 10 or 11%, almost as much, if not more, than the defense budget. The problem is if we have to keep taking out more debt year after year after year to pay for what we need in the budget, that increases the interest payment on the debt that we have. And eventually, the interest payments on our debt are going to represent a larger and larger portion of our federal budget. And if interest payments take up more of the budget every single year, that means we have to borrow even more money to pay for the existing things, which ends up being this snowball effect until one day the interest payments on our debt are 100% of our budget. And then the United States is finished. So it's just one of these problems that you have to address. And it's so weird because, like, if you ask a Democrat, should the government cut back and become more efficient? They'll say, yeah. But then when you offer solutions on how to do that, they fight against them vigorously as if there's some sort of threat to the institution. It's the same thing that they do with illegal immigration. They'll try to say, legal immigration, yeah, it probably needs to be addressed. Okay, so we deport everybody, right? And then it alleviates some of this tax burden on these cities and states and the federal government that have to maintain them. Oh, no, that's racist. That's xenophobic. You can't do that. It's like they feel good when they say that the problem is a problem. But the moment that they're presented with an opportunity to fix it, they fight against it because it's a threat to their power and control. Now listen to Vivek, who yesterday was at the CFO summit, talking about what the goals and the plans of Doge are. Now, this is the most reasonable and rational thing that could possibly be said. And remember, this is what the Democrats are fighting against. Watch.
Right now, the people we elect to run the government, they're not the ones who actually run the government. It's unelected and even in many cases unappointed federal bureaucrats that make most decisions that impact everyday Americans, both through the regulatory state and even through expenditures that go out the door from people who were not elected and not even appointed by those who were elected. So it's a massive problem we're taking on, but I do think that it is something that we're taking on in a very different way, and I hope to have, therefore, a different result.
Is there any one thing that President Trump has told you, I want you to go cut that?
You know, I think he actually is looking at it the other way in terms of keeping a very open mind, top down, to say that let's start with a clean slate. Let's start fresh, and everything is in scope for what counts as government efficiency. It's not one part of the federal government or the other. It's actually looking at it as a whole. Are we respecting the taxpayer dollar? In some ways, to use an analogy to those in this room, in the way that a CFO would look at their shareholder capital. In many ways, you are also stewards of capital, right? Your shareholders are the owners of your companies. I assume these are mostly publicly traded company CFOs in the room. Your duty is to the shareholder to ensure that that money is spent to maximize the size of their pie. You're their steward. I don't think the people who have historically spent government dollars view themselves in that same type of stewardship relationship with the taxpayer, who is like effectively the shareholder of the federal government. And I think if you view the way the federal government spends the taxpayer money, and that was in a corporate context, that would be a fiduciary breach, hands down. I think the officers of that public company would at minimum be fired and at worst be civilly or worse in court over the dereliction of duty they owe to the people who have entrusted them with that capital.
Yeah, the government mismanages money because they don't feel like they actually have an obligation to the taxpayer. That's why the American people voted for Donald Trump, to shake things up, fix the corruption, fix the political manipulation of our agencies and institutions, make this thing actually work for the American people again. Again, the incentives between the government and the citizenry are misaligned. The government's incentive is more power, more control, bigger, more expansive, more intrusive, more control over your daily life, and that requires more money. A survey actually came out that said that less than 1% of government employees, if you exclude security and maintenance people, are in the office 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, on the taxpayer dime. Listen to Speaker Mike Johnson address this. Watch.
Some labor unions are already fighting back. They've already signed contracts to try and get this, that they could be able to work from home, things like that. Your reaction to that?
Well, there was a report that came out today. I don't know if you all have seen it, but someone did a little survey of how many federal employees are actually working in the office. By one estimate, it may be about 1% if you don't count the security personnel that are covering these buildings. That is absurd, and it's not something the American people would stand for. And so one of the first things that I think you'll see is a demand from the new administration and from all of us in Congress that federal workers return to their desks and get back to the work that they're supposed to be doing. I think that is common sense. What you're going to see here, the overriding theme here, is a return to common sense and a return to accountability and efficiency in government. I think that's going to serve the people well.
And that is the whole point of efficiency. It doesn't have to always be things like direct budget cuts. It can be getting more out of what you're already spending by just looking at policies and the way things are administered. And as you heard the reporter say, the unions are already fighting against that idea because they've signed contracts that allow for work from home and other things like that. Because the government is not interested in being as efficient as it possibly can. It thinks it has a blank check every year from the American taxpayers, and if they don't fulfill what they need to be able to spend it, they just raise debt that, oh yeah, also has to be paid back by the American taxpayer. And as I pointed out in my example earlier, that will inevitably bankrupt the country, send it into a depression. We're going to have to go through austerity. They're going to cut everything to zero, not just make slight cuts, in order to survive in some way. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Isn't it a little bit weird that Democrats are fighting so hard against the idea of the government being run well. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done that already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video, and I will see you guys in the next one.